Good evening. Welcome to the 2019 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Wallingford Community Women. I'm Jean McFarland, the program moderator. This segment features 5 of the 12 candidates running for town council. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by members of the local media, including the Record Journal and the New Haven Register, and students from Lyman Hall High School and Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make closing remarks. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce 5 of the candidates running for town council. They are, from your left to right, Vincent Cervoni, Republican; Jamie Hein, Democrat; Craig Fishbein, Republican; Jeff Cohan, Democrat; Tom Laffin, Republican. Gina Morgenstein, Democrat, is unable to attend this meeting this evening. I will read a statement submitted by Mrs. Morgenstein during the closing remarks segment. Lauren Takores, would you please ask the first question of Vincent Cervoni?
Yes, thank you, Jean. Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
The town finished fiscal year 17-18 with a roughly $1.6 million deficit, according to the most recent financial audit. As a result, the town's general fund balance, or rainy day fund, decreased from $27.8 million to $26.2 million. Now, the town's 2018 taxable grand list increased by 1.19%, a bump that would mean about $1.4 million more in revenue going into the next budget. What should the town council's budget priorities be going into 2020-2021?
Can you read that to me again? Just kidding. Thank you for that challenging question. In all seriousness, with the increase in the grand list, you hope for a reduction in the mill rate, or certainly not a need to increase it. The cost of running the town is relatively stable, subject to the typical wage increases that we deal with. But at the same time, you don't want to be running deficits consistently. If you'll recall, the fiscal year before, we also ran a similar deficit. And while I wouldn't quibble over less than 1% of a deficit, you do have to be mindful of that. So, you know, I think we have to see what the end result is with respect to the grand list. You look at everything it costs to run the town, to keep the town running the way it should be, and you compare the two numbers, and you tax no more than you absolutely have to. I think that historically this town has been pretty good about keeping our budgeting close to where it should be. Even the years before the prior to, we ran small surpluses of similar amounts. So, you know, the less than 1% variation is something that I think we should, the sitting council and the mayor should be credited for. And we'll certainly be mindful of all of those factors and deal with them in the years to come.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sanjana Gade, would you please ask the next question of Jamie Hein?
Good evening, Mr. Hein.
Good evening, Sanjana.
Do you plan to support a plan to attract businesses to Wallingford in order to keep taxes lower for residents of Wallingford?
Yes. The short answer is yes. In fact, I think that's one of the most important things that we should be looking at right now. If you take a look at our lower downtown area, that area has been lagging for some time. You know, ever since I've lived here, and I've lived here 14 years, and I'm sure people that have lived here longer can tell you that it's been that way for longer than that. I think as town councilors, we need to put a greater focus on that. We need to look at public-private partnerships. We need to look at how we can deploy maybe some of that $26 million in rainy day fund to revitalize that area, right? If we can revitalize that area and take some of those empty storefronts and fill them, we now have properties that are producing tax revenue for us for the long term. And we also should keep in mind that the state is looking at that $26 million and saying, wait a minute, Wallingford, we're giving you way too much money, right? So at least if we can use some of those funds in a way that is going to set us up in the long term, I think that's what we need to do, and that's a creative way of keeping that state funding while at the same time setting us up for long-term success. Thank you.
Thank you. Tyler Parente, will you please ask the next question of Craig Fishbein?
Hi, Craig.
Hey, Tyler, how are you?
Relating to what Lauren asked, what is the key to making a sustainable budget for our town?
Well, the role of government is to, at its very crux, is to provide fundamental services. So you have to parse out those fundamental services to begin with. One of those that's very important to me is public safety. So you have to give attention to your police needs, your fire needs. You know, this week we had a meeting with the fire department and we approved unanimously for the first time a municipal contract which is going to allow us to have 2 ambulances on 24 hours a day. You know, that's something that we have gotten to over a period of time over the 10 years or so that I've been on the council. You know, public safety is very important. You know, from there you have public works. You know, the plowing of streets, the maintaining of streets. You know, that is a fundamental function of government. Sidewalks and, you know, maintaining those sidewalks. Operating the many buildings that we have. You know, you have to look at those priorities first because we have a fundamental duty to the taxpayer to take their money and to utilize it for the common good. And then we look at other things. So that's how I prioritize a budget. So thank you for the question.
Luther Trammell, would you please ask the next question of Jeff Cohan?
Jeff, where do you stand on the position of expanding the economic development operation in Wallingford? I mean, currently it's a part-time head of the department, and later tonight I know we're going to hear from Mr. Liu about greatly expanding the economic development department. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, thanks, Luther. That's actually one of the campaign issues I'm running on because, you know, I'm currently on planning and zoning. I'm serving my second 5-year term on that. So I see a lot of what goes into, you know, attracting businesses and, you know, the processes and, quite frankly, some of the problems they run into. You know, if I do get on the council, I'm absolutely, first thing, going to advocate for a full-time town urban planner. You know, we can take some money out of that rainy day fund, $26 million, which, you know, at 1%, 1.5% is really not doing us any good. If we hire a full-time, you know, planner to help Casey Hand, and I see, you know, this urban planner's responsibilities different than Casey's. I would advocate for that. You know, this person will be a full-time person to show us how to develop the town. You know, we'll get the person who has success in, you know, building a, you know, town like Middletown or West Hartford that's had success in attracting other businesses, developing, you know, around the train station. Tim Ryan, I think, does, you know, an outstanding job, as well as the Economic Development Commission. And I'd like to see Tim, you know, become a full-time person as well. You know, economic development is key to a number of things in town, and we absolutely have to work harder in that area.
Lauren Turquoise, would you please ask the next question of Tom Laffin?
Hi, Tom. Good. Are you in
We do.
favor? Oh,
Hi.
ready?
Yep, ready.
Are you in favor of or opposed to revising zoning regulations to allow advertising in town parks?
I'm undecided. And I know that's probably like, oh, that's a very campaignish, answer to give. But I am. So it's complicated because when everybody thinks of all the town parks, you think of the baseball fields and the soccer fields. But the soccer fields are located all within or near the Tower Mill Preserve, and then do we want to be advertising there? Those are more open, they're not gated, they're not fenced, it's different. Where would you put an advertisement on a soccer field? So then are you limiting it to just baseball fields that have the walls or the fences, and then who gets that money? Does the Park and Rec Department get it to spread out through everybody, or does just Little League get it, and then is that fair? There's a lot that has to be kind of hammered out. A lot of people have actually come to me with concerns. Some people want it. All the Little League people want it because it fits their fields. But other people have come to me just concerned that it would take away from that small town kind of feel. And when you do something like that, you're kind of inviting vandalism and other issues that could really come into the parks. I mean, we already have police that patrol the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park over by the Tower Mill, on the east side of town. So I want to think that it would be a great idea, another revenue source, but I'm really just not convinced. Not that I couldn't be, but from what we've talked about already, I'm a vote that can be swayed. So I think that's probably reason for the two sides to come at me more in the next couple of weeks or months. But to be perfectly honest, I just don't know yet. I don't know enough about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sanjana, would you please ask the next question of Vincent Cervoni?
Good evening, Mr. Cervoni.
Good evening, Ms. Gade.
The town of Wallingford is able to provide low-cost electricity through its municipality agreements with power companies. How can you ensure that the residents of Wallingford will continue to benefit from these agreements?
In the town council, we've had a lot of involvement with the electric division over the time that I've been sitting on the council. We do have oversight. Typically, the PUC runs its regular operations, the Public Utilities Commission, and we have oversight and review of their actions. I think they've done a pretty good job of keeping our rates very stable. Several years ago, we went from buying all of our electricity through the Connecticut Municipal Electrical Energy Cooperative, and we changed that to going out and through our own brokers acquiring power. And I hear from the Public Utilities Commission that we've been better able to stay ahead of stabilizing, keeping our rates very stable. I think when the PUC has appeared before the council while I've been on it, I think we've certainly scrutinized their activities, and I think we've been appropriately supportive, and that has certainly allowed us to maintain stable electric rates, lowest in the state of Connecticut, and I believe that we will continue to do that because we have a talented staff at the Public Utilities Commission. We have a very forward-thinking group of people on the Public Utilities Commission, and I think all of that is a very good recipe that I will continue to support when re-elected. Sanjana, thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Tyler, would you please ask the next question of Jamie Hine?
Hi, Mr. Hine.
Hi, Tyler, how are you?
Good, thank you. Would you support making the shift to renewable energy in Wallingford?
I would. I think that it's very important. I think that's the way that the trend is going. That's the future. That's the future. We're talking about right now. we have a school facility study going on. And there's very little consideration, in my opinion, to how we can build these buildings and take into account renewable energies and lead construction on these buildings. And I think that's something that we should be considering. If we want these buildings to last, and if that's the way of our future, then we should. We should. So I'm in complete favor of it. And thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Luther, would you please ask the next question of Craig Fishbein?
Craig, sticking with the issue of the town's electric division, was the legal battle with CMEC money well spent for the town?
Thank you for that question. I guess it depends on who you ask. When the electric division originally came to us and said we have this dispute and we'd like some money to litigate, mediate, there was a representation as to what the legal expenses were going to be. And I voted to allow them to do that. That was the only time that I voted to allow the legal expenses to continue. I read a lot of documents. I made a lot of recommendations. I thought and had recommended during the proceedings that the arrangement between the electric division, the PUC, and the law firm should have been changed. That if we're going after this amount of money and there's a representation from the expert lawyer, the law firm that was brought in to do this, that, at the end of the rainbow there'll be a pot of gold, then give them a piece. Reduce the hourly rate that we, the ratepayers, pay for some sort of a contingency fee agreement. And unfortunately that was not entertained, and I continued to vote against that. In the end, I don't think it was. No matter what you hear about the future, personally, I just don't think it was, and I know my time is up, but thank you very much for that question.
Lauren, would you please ask the next question of Jeff Cohan?
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Lauren.
If elected, would you vote in favor of a budget with a mill rate increase?
No. I will make this pledge right now that I will not vote for a budget increase over my first term. Taxes is my other second reason for running for office. We've seen too many tax increases over the last 2 decades. The Republicans talk, a fairly good game about taxes, but their actions don't, follow up their words. And, with the bloated rainy day fund, and, people will say, well, we've had minimal tax increases. But if you add in what we add to the rainy day fund, it's more of a tax increase than you think. So I will not be supporting any, tax increases. One of the first things I will do, if elected, is, get the last year's budget, dig into, what the expenses were, talk to the department heads about their expenses, and really scrutinize, what we're spending. And, there's been a lot of budget workshops where, quite frankly, some of the town councilors don't show up. They don't ask the tough questions. And I will show up at the budget meetings. I will ask those tough questions. I've done that in my professional career. And, we need to stop the tax increases.
Thank you.
Sanjana, would you please ask the next question of Tom Laffin?
Hi,
Good evening, Mr. Lappin.
good evening.
Internships are becoming more and more important for students to gain experience and exposure to career opportunities. How would you like to attract businesses who may offer internship opportunities for Wallingford students?
I think we attract businesses like that the same way we attract businesses now or any sort of business. I mean, usually I guess an internship, the type of company you're thinking of is probably a larger one, or, we have had Anthem and other larger companies in Wallingford here. Bristol Myers was here. Companies that can host internships like that, companies that can provide a valuable experience. So, I mean, one of the ways for government to be involved, at least at the council level, is when they're considering moving to town, is there some sort of deal to be worked out as far as like a tax incentive for the construction or building of where they're going to move into and things like that. Otherwise, we're really looking at what we have in our Economic Development Commission and our Economic Development Coordinator, Tim Ryan, to constantly have the feelers out and be meeting with those businesses and trying to draw them into Wallingford to let them know what we have here. We have the lower tax rates for the area. We're strategically positioned not just between New York and Boston, but we have the Merritt Parkway and 91 running through the center of town, more or less the center of town. And the electric rates are very low, and that leads to a lot of good opportunities in the technology industry that may be running a lot of servers and need uptime without downage and things. So it's really about selling Wallingford just as we would any other business, and you would hope that the internships would come along with that, and then making sure, and as they already do, that those businesses are talking to the Board of Education so that they can engage those high school students or the ones that have just graduated and are looking to come back during the summer and engage in some sort of internship there. Because I'm out of time, but a lot of times colleges that you stay where you are away from Wallingford, because we don't have any colleges here. But, sorry.
Tyler, would you please ask the next question of Vincent Cervoni?
Hi, Mr. Savoni. So how would you address health issues in Wallingford, like the vaping epidemic and opioid addiction? What are some key solutions to solving these?
Well, thank you, Mr. Parente. You've hit on an incredibly important issue in society today. In this past term, we passed an ordinance that increased the age to purchase both smokeless and combustible tobacco in Wallingford to 21. The state later followed suit. In my time on the council, I have supported the Coalition for a Better Wallingford. It's Red Ribbon Week. I think they're having activities out on the parade grounds related to that, and I will continue to support those things. We have a pretty terrific health department in town who are very mindful of those issues, and I've certainly supported their activities whenever given the opportunity. With respect to the opioid crisis, the town is a plaintiff in a lawsuit against one of the major opioid manufacturers. That is on a contingent fee agreement, which means that the firm handling the case will get paid if and when they recover on behalf of the town. That case is pending while there are some legal rulings being made, but throughout the nation, there are awards being made against these pharmaceutical companies that have produced these addictive opioids. And I think one thing that I would encourage us all to do is be aware of the people around you. I had a client who was going through a difficult time in his life with his children, and he said, every night when my kid comes home, I give him a hug and a kiss. And that's so that I can get close enough to him to look right into his eyes and to smell him, to smell if he's been around something or if there's something on his breath. And I'm not necessarily advocating that you go hug a stranger, but when people are close to you, please be aware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luther, would you please ask the next question of Jamie Hine?
Jamie, the operation of this public school system is the purview of any town's Board of Education, but ultimately it's the town council, the governing body, that controls the purse strings. With that in mind, do you feel that there are any school buildings among the stock currently operated by the district that shouldn't be renovated, that there should be a new building built? And secondly, do you favor consolidation of schools?
Sure. So let me begin in answering that question by saying that I believe education is the most important service that any town can give to their children or to its children. That being said, we are talking, when you look at these school facilities, I certainly think that there's some schools that are in need of renovation, okay? However, to me, in my personal opinion, what is more important are the people that fill those facilities, not the facilities themselves. And we're talking about spending millions upon millions of dollars. And if we're going to spend that kind of money on renovations, I want to make sure that it's going to actually improve the education that our children are receiving. And I have not been convinced of that yet. Okay? I can be convinced. One of the things that concerns me is I feel like we're halfway down the road and there's been no showing as of yet that this is actually going to improve the education of our children. With respect to consolidation, again, you'd have to show me that consolidation is going to improve the education. Okay, education is not always just about dollars and cents. And so, again, I want to make sure that if we consolidate, somebody's got to prove to me that it's going to improve the education of our students. Thank you.
Lauren, would you please ask the next question of Craig Fishbein?
Hi, Craig.
Hey Lauren, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Earlier this year, Emerald Hospitality Associates, which had purchased the Hilton Garden Inn on Barnes Road, asked the town council to extend to them a tax break that was approved for the hotel's previous owner. Because of a wording error in the resolution, the council took the opportunity to apparently reverse its decision. The issue of the tax break to Emerald is effectively dead. In your opinion, was that fair of the town council to essentially take advantage of a loophole to revisit this conversation and reverse its decision? And what precedent does that set for other businesses considering a move to Wallingford?
All right, so first of all, I voted against the original tax break.
I know you did.
Okay? And I don't know that 2 minutes, however, 2 minutes is long enough for this one. But, you know, there's three other hotels at basically that intersection. And one of my arguments was, well, what break did they get? Obviously they can operate, obviously that hotel is full, you know, so why are the taxpayers saddled with this? The owner purchased the property when it's in foreclosure, and then he comes to the town saying, I want a tax break. So that's the origin of the thing that I voted against. The agreement said that if you sell, because there was representations made to the council that I won't, you know, I'm with this project, I'm going to be with it for the long haul. So we made as part of the contract, if you sell it, it would go away, that tax break would go away. So they sold it. And the entity that received it then came to us afterwards. And I said to them, if you were my client and I read this contract, it would have been contingent, that sale would have been contingent upon the council voting on that and giving it to the successor. That's strict contract law, we do it every day. And then they came to us with a story as to why we should give it to them. And I just didn't think it was fair to the taxpayers. We had a contract and we have to abide by the contract. So I know my 2 minutes is up, so thank you.
Sanjana, would you please ask the next question of Jeff Cohan?
Good evening, Mr. Cohan.
Hi.
What would be your position on the expansion of trails throughout Wallingford, and as well as the town acquiring open space?
This is a perfect question for me. You know, I love the open space in Wallingford, and you know, I run through there several times a week. I do a lot of photography out in our open spaces. I've hiked, you know, the trails just recently with the Conservation Commission. They've had some guided tours out in Tyler Mill and our other open space areas. You know, I would like to see more areas, and I would certainly support, if I get elected to the council, purchasing more open space. But more importantly, I think that we could work with a lot of landowners to, you know, hopefully have them give us or deed that property to us to expand our open space. I would also support the some additional funding for the Conservation Commission because, like I said, I'm out there quite a bit. I see all the work they do. You know, when we had all the trees fall in Tyler Mill, they did a tremendous amount of work. And I'd like to see some, you know, simple tools for these folks to, you know, pull up some invasive species, maintain the trails. And, you know, it's not going to cost us a lot of money, but it would certainly improve the, you know, great open space that we do have. Total support of our open space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler, would you please ask the next question of Tom Laffin?
Hi, Mr. Laffin.
How are you?
Do you support building a new community pool in Wallingford?
I do. That was an easy answer, thank you. Yeah, no, I do. And I think what's important is, you know, what the town's constantly growing, right? When I look back, when I'm putting together my re-election campaign, and I look back at all the, you know, the obligatory photos of the kids and the family and stuff like that, and I've seen how much they've grown over the years, and you really start to think about how it's not just the two of them that have grown, but the whole town, all their friends, all the friends' families. I mean, I'm sure you guys, you know, since I've been elected, and with that, the town, you know, I know we try and run a tight budget, and what kind of services do we offer our community? We've always had a pretty cool community pool, and it's been wearing down over the last couple of years, and we knew that it was reaching its end of life. So the Park and Rec Commission, the Park and Rec Department, and the council have been talking, and we've been planning and preparing for this. So everything's kind of working out as it should. But I do feel that is a cool part of town. It's a cool draw for people to live here, because not everybody can afford a pool in their backyard. I can't. So it's a cool place to bring your kids during the summer. And we're looking at adding the splash pad, and there will be room for future growth of other uses and needs in the future. But I do. It's going to cost money, but I think if we all understand that going in, that's okay. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Luther, would you please ask the next question of Vincent Cervoni?
Vinny, as a town councilor, you're one of 9 people making important decisions that affect the town. A lot has been mentioned tonight about low electric rates and the role that the PUC plays in keeping those electric rates low. Yet they are a much smaller governing body, for lack of a better term. Would you favor increasing the size of the PUC?
Luther, my friend, you had to go there, didn't you? The people that sit on the PUC are typically very well uniquely qualified to sit in those positions. We have people who have experience in the utility world or in the regulatory world, and we're fortunate to have them give their time. I mean, they get paid a small stipend like the council does, but to give their time to the town to monitor this very, very important asset that the town has, that makes one of the assets that makes the town as great as it is. I think the PUC has functioned very well with 3 members. We had a charter revision a year ago, or was it 2 years ago? And that issue was brought up. It was given to the Charter Commission to address, and they chose not to make a change. Would it be the worst thing in the world if there were 2 more commissioners added? I don't think so. But the way to change that is to open up the charter again and to have to bring a change to the charter. It's part of the the constitution of the town that's the way it's run. So I think the town had the opportunity 2 years ago during the charter revision process to add a couple of more commissioners, and the commission refused to, and that charter was passed overwhelmingly. Thank you, Luther.
Lauren, would you please ask the next question of Jamie Hine?
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Lauren.
How can the town better fund public safety given the recurrent issues with police staffing and the situation with taking Rescue 3 offline for a month earlier this year?
How can it better fund it? Just fund it. We have $26 million in a rainy day fund that is stashed away, not doing anything. Yet we're taking emergency vehicles offline. That to me makes no sense. We have the power to fund public safety. We had a rash of burglaries a few months ago. And our police department, Chief Wright, does a great job. Great job. But when you ask how can we fund it, or how can we better fund it, just fund it. If we're down a couple officers, fund the officers. Right? That's one of the bedrock duties of a town government. So to me, the answer is clear. We have low tax rates. We have a $26 million surplus. Fund it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Sanjana, would you please ask the next question of Craig Fishbein?
Good evening, Mr. Fishbein. Are term limits for the office of the mayor something that should be considered, or should the residents of Wallingford continue to have the power to choose the mayor of their choice?
I'm generally against term limits. I mean, from my perspective, the mayor, all of our elected officials have a term limit every time they come up for re-election. So, you only hear about term limits when people get frustrated about an incumbent that's been in there that can't be unseated by an election. We see that on the federal basis. We see that in some municipalities, but I just, what happens when you get like a fantastic person in that role, and not by action of the people, but action of a document, that fantastic person cannot continue? That just fundamentally, I just have a problem with that. So that's my answer to your question. I just want, we've heard tonight about utilization of reserves for ongoing operating expenses of the government, and I just, I'm opposed to that. So just want to throw that out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler, would you please ask the next question of Jeff Cohan?
Hi, Mr. Cohen.
Hi, Tyler.
how would you encourage small businesses to open in Wallingford?
As I stated before, one of my main campaign issues is economic development, and we do need small business in town. One of the things I brought up at one of the planning and zoning meetings where we're working on our transit-oriented development was actually the lower downtown. And, I said, quite frankly, it's not that attractive. Let's spend some town money, pretty up the lower downtown. And there's also some grants from the state or federal government where we can do some, beautification projects, streetscapes and things like that. I think by, doing some of those things, some of our alleyways up on, Simpson Court should be a little more pretty as well. I think if we make the downtown a little more attractive, we'll be able to encourage small business to relocate. If we do the planning right along the train station, the businesses will, migrate there, and we just have to encourage them, find out what their needs are. Again, I think the EDC does a good program in reaching out. We just got to make it, attractive for them. Thank you.
Luther, would you please ask the last question of Tom Laffin?
Tom, is the Economic Development Commission and the town's economic development professionals, are they targeting the wrong kind of industries? And by that I mean, I know there was a lot of concern and consternation about the plan that Calaire had for a warehouse on the former Bristol-Myers Squibb property. But at the same time, the evidence that Amazon has come to Wallingford and has a facility here suggests that because of, as you mentioned earlier, the different roads that come through the town, that warehousing might make sense. Should the town be targeting more warehouse operations and businesses that can take advantage of the low electric rates?
Sure, as long as they're not right outside of a neighborhood, which is, I think, what the problem was with the Bristol-Myers site. And I think I kind of, if not the only, was one of the stronger people that came out and said, that's not a good fit. I mean, I sit through all these ordinance meetings with, about the noise violations that Thurston's was going through and being accused of or labeled with. And in that case, they existed first, so development came in. They said, hey, we make a lot of noise. And everybody's like, eh. And they built the houses, and then the neighbors are like, well, there's so much noise, you guys got to stop. And here we were on the flip side of it. We had the houses already, and we're looking to throw in, a larger trucking facility and warehouse. It just wasn't a good spot in town for that type of location. Plenty of other places in town for it. And I think the Economic Development Commission, Tim Ryan, do a great job of trying to bring in those businesses, especially businesses like Amazon. In manufacturing, I was just out at a restaurant the other day and started talking to one of the chief finance officers of a company. They're in California, and they bought a Wallingford company because of the taxes, the electric rates, and all that other stuff. And he said, it's great for manufacturing. He said, it's perfect. The Economic Development Commission is made up of really strong business leaders in town that know what they're doing. And I do think they are attracting all the right people. And it's not that that warehouse was a bad fit for Wallingford. It was a bad fit for that spot. As convenient as it might have been and as great as it might have been to get that money out of the gate, I think Wallingford's strong enough that we could last a little bit longer and wait for the right thing instead of taking the first, rebound business and then marrying that for the rest of our lives. Thanks.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Vincent Cervoni, would you please begin?
Thank you. Thanks to the Wallingford Community Women, to the Government TV staff, and to our questioners, Luther, Tyler, Sanjana, and Lauren. I've had 5 terms up here, and I've watched the landscape change. In my first term, I was flanked on my left by Councilor Letourneau and Councilor Fishbein on my right. In my second term, Councilor Fishbein was on my left, and Chairman Parisi was on my right. In my third term, former Chairman Parisi was on my right, and Vice Chair Laffin was on my left. In the past 2 terms, the same Vice Chair has been on my left, and Councilor Shortell has been on my right. And quite often the space between Councilor Shortell and I is occupied by some kind of Star Wars paraphernalia or some other desk art. Lately, he doesn't seem to feel the need to inspire me that way. My point is that this council has changed by at least 1 member in every successive term that I've been here. Each new councilor has brought his or her unique perspective to this experience, but one thing has remained constant, and that is ultimately that we work toward the common goal of the common good for Wallingford, and by and large, we make good decisions. I'm pleased to have participated in the past decade of Wallingford government. There have been changes on the economic landscape, yet overall this has been a time of growth for Wallingford. The economic growth this week has been crowned by the announcement of the promise of the Proton Laser Cancer Center, the treatment facility that will be on Northrop Road. While the rest of Connecticut flounders under the growing appetite for taxation in Hartford, Wallingford has remained stable with low tax increases, predictable results from sound budgets. We have consistently provided for the needs of this town with its health, public safety, educational, infrastructural, and economic development, all requirements in mind. We'll continue to do so, and for those reasons, I ask that you vote for myself and the entire Republican team on November 5th. Thank you all.
Jamie Hine, would you please make your statement?
Thank you. Thank you to the Wallingford Community Women, Government TV, the moderators, the questioners, the audience here in the auditorium, and the audience at home. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I think I would be a good town councilor. For any of you that do not know me, my name is Jamie Hine. I've lived here 14 years. I'm married with an 8-year-old son. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for 16 years. I do litigation work at a 7-attorney firm in Hamden. My wife is also an attorney. She does legal aid work in New Britain. I've previously served on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and presently I'm serving on the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission. A few years back, the town had proposed purchasing a parking lot next door to my house. As you can imagine, I was not too keen on that. I did an investigation. I asked the right questions. I did my homework. I asked the questions that nobody else was willing to ask on the town council. What I learned was that the town could expand the parking lot in an alternative direction, end up with the same number of spaces, not have to purchase the lot next door to me, and here's the kicker, for hundreds of thousands of dollars less. I did that as a regular citizen, okay? And I plan on doing the same on the town council with your support. I ask for your support, and if you have any questions about my positions, please go to my website, jamiehine.com. Thank you.
Craig Fishbein, would you please make your statement?
Thank you. Thank you. Approximately 1600, Hamlet was written by Shakespeare. And in Scene 1, Act 3, Polonius is addressing his son, Laertes. And he gives him some very wise advice. He says, neither a borrower nor lender be. And at some levels, that's how I think government should operate. You know, Polonius is the punchline is that there's strings that come with all of that. And for the most part, government should be self-sustaining. That you shouldn't have to rely upon others to borrow money or to sustain your services. That's just fundamental. The other words of advice that Polonius gave to Laertes is, this above all, to thine own self be true, something that I live by. And, you know, every time I've run, I've told you that I will stand for smaller government, lower taxes, less interference in the day-to-day affairs of our law-abiding citizens. Each day when I go home, if I can look in the mirror, look myself in the eye, and know that to myself I have been true, I know that I have completed my job, not only for myself, but for you. And if you adopt those principles that I've outlined to you, and you support those principles, you know what to do on Election Day. I thank you for your support, and God bless America.
Jeff Cohen, would you please make your statement?
Thank you. Just a little bit about my background. I've basically lived in Wallingford my entire life. It's a great town. I enjoy being here. And some of the critical skills that I feel I will bring to the council if elected, you know, are from my professional career. I was an information technology executive with Aetna and IBM. The skills I had, you know, in practice and acquired were critical listening skills. I like to, you know, hear what people say. I weigh their comments and consider them. I had to collaborate with a variety of stakeholders and constituents in coming up with solutions to problems. As you can tell, information technology requires a lot of complex problem solving, and I work through a lot of elegant solutions to issues doing that. I don't see a lot of those skills on the council, and that's one of the reasons I'm running. You know, again, my platform is taxes, lower taxes, economic development, and I want to see more transparency on the council. You know, we need to discuss things. We need to have minutes posted on our website. And I just want to comment really quickly on one of the most underreported issues we had, and Mr. Savoni talked about it as the town council having oversight of the PUC. The CMEC fiasco put our electric division at risk, and this really pushed me over the edge as to why I wanted to run. You know, that electric division, you know, is 100 years old. Nobody was here when, I guess I'm out of time. Thank you, and I hope you'll support me.
Tom Laffin, would you please make your statement?
Yes, Jean, thank you, and the Wallingford Community Women, thank you. The staff at the Wallingford Government TV, the viewers here, the viewers on the Government TV channel home and YouTube, thank you. I was going to say something completely different when I first sat down, and now my mind is somewhere completely elsewhere. I grew up in Wallingford my entire life, except for those 4 years that, you know, some of us go away to college. But I came back, and my kids are growing up here too. And right now they're both in middle school. And so why am I running? You know, this year in the beginning it seemed like, well, because I've done it the last couple of years, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And I didn't have the same kind of like energy, and I didn't have that same like kind of vigor. But almost like tonight alone, you know, I realized because I want to run for the same reason I ran the first time I ran for the town council. Because I want to keep Wallingford as great as it has been. To keep Wallingford as great as it was when I was growing up in the 80s and the 90s. I got involved because I saw a threat to that responsible, fiscally conservative governing style and the loss, or the fear of the loss of that small town feel. And tonight, you see some of the differences. And with all due respect, some of my opponents, they're not going to vote for a budget increase, but they're going to hire a new urban development manager. They're going to make the EDC guy full-time. They're going to spend government money on lower downtown, and we're going to spend money on renewable energy, which is great, but a lot of it is all just very expensive and still, frankly, experimental, and that's the scary part. Governing is a lot trickier than just standing up, and I'm out of time already. Can we have 3 minutes next year? Okay. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, I have a statement from Gina Morgenstein. It is with regret that a long-standing commitment takes me out of state tonight. I would like to thank the Wallingford community women who not only run this forum, but perform numerous events that enrich our community. These volunteers demonstrate year after year civic commitment and are cornerstone of Wallingford. I want to thank our reporters from the Record Journal and the New Haven Register. Your commitment to local news should be commended and supported. For our student questioners, thank you. The world you inherit depends on the adults entrusted presently with decision-making on your behalf. Please hold us accountable. I have been honored and humbled that I was entrusted by the voters 2 years ago to serve this wonderful town of Wallingford. Wallingford deserves representation that is not content with the status quo. We cannot be complacent to just repeat what was done in the past. The world around us is changing, and as representatives, we need to adapt and grow to new challenges, seizing opportunity. Wallingford needs economic growth. Our grand list is not growing, placing a yearly burden onto our individual taxpayers. This cannot be sustained as we look at expensive school renovations and aging roads, sidewalks, and a water treatment facility a decade overdue for upgrades. We need a smart, targeted investment in lower downtown that has languished for decades. With a new train station, residential growth at Parker Place, we can do better. We also need smart growth that redevelops a deserted Bristol-Myers campus that does not degrade our neighborhood or our environment. Wallingford deserves representation that plans for a sustainable energy future. Visionaries took a calculated leap over a century ago to establish Wallingford Electric. That legacy has paid dividends to this community up to the present time. Now we must be prepared to build on that energy needs and consumption that poses challenges in a world dealing with climate emergency. Wallingford deserves a commitment for a healthy community. We should not lose our community pool. We need leadership that does not avoid or deny for years the opioid epidemic that has broken our families and community bonds. Wallingford needs our first responders. We cannot allow another occurrence of an emergency vehicle, Rescue 3, to be mothballed for a month because our leadership chooses not to use any funds from a rainy day that holds over $26 million. As leaders, we need to acknowledge and support our teachers who we entrust with our children. We need to support our town workers. As leaders, we need to support both the young and old with opportunities to grow and nurture in our community. To our working population, we owe a government that can budget wisely and create an environment that adds value to your investment in this community. All of you collectively own this town, and as caretakers, we as representatives have an ultimately answer to you, the voters, if we have met these challenges. I am asking for your trust for another 2 years. I am committed to push to support what has worked, but push harder for what we can do better. Wallingford is my home and it is yours. Our vision should be always make it better for all our citizens. I humbly ask for your support this November 5th. And with that, thank you. This concludes part 1 of the 2019 Town Council Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to please vote on November 5th.
Welcome to the 2019 Candidates Forum, sponsored by the Wallingford Community Women. I'm Beth Raccio, the program moderator. This segment features 6 of the 12 candidates running for town council. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by members of the local media, including the Record Journal and New Haven Register, as well as students from Lyman Hall High School and Mark T. Sheehan High School. The second part will allow each candidate to make closing statements. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to a question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make closing remarks. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce 6 of the candidates running for town council. They are left to right: Joe Marone, Republican; Jesse Reynolds, Democrat; Chris Shortell, Republican; Vincent Testa, Democrat; Christina Tata, Republican; and Jason Zandri, Democrat. So let's get started. Lauren Decoris, will you please ask the first question of Joe Marone?
Yes. Hi, Joe. Although a middle and high school renovation plan hasn't been formally presented to the town council and won't be for some time, the 3 options will remain the same. Are you in favor of any of these plans? Why or why not?
So I think we need to go back to what are we looking at? What are we looking to do? So I know we did a survey in town where we talked about what folks were looking for, 21st century classrooms, so on and so forth. I'm afraid that what we're planning for now is sort of how schools are now or how schools were, say, in the past several years. And I think that the future is going to see a lot of dramatic change to how kids are educated. For the one thing, I was on the Board of Ed for 3 terms, so this is something that we would talk about frequently. When you look at how kids are educated now, it's very labor intensive, right? Because there's a lot of personnel in the school system. And I think if you look at any medium to large size business and you look at where you're going to make cuts, 88% of our school budget is salaries and benefits, right? So you need to find a way to trim salaries and benefits. So I think that to build new buildings to prepare for what we're doing now is maybe a little foolhardy. I think maybe you have to start looking at what's the next, say, 100 years of education going to bring. I think you're going to see more technology in the classroom. I think you're going to see fewer teachers, and you're going to see more people being educated by screens and things. Screens are so prevalent in our household now. I have 3 kids. They all have different technology and different screens. So I think we need to start stepping away maybe from the way that we've done it in the past, the sort of World War II school model, the stand up and deliver, and maybe start looking at utilizing more technology and how you can educate perhaps more kids at lower cost, and how you're going to prepare for the future. So I think new buildings are great, within reason. We have some aging schools, obviously, but I think we've done a pretty good job at maintaining our schools, and so I'm not sure that I'm in favor of any of the plans as presented. I mean, depending on how they're all expensive is the bottom line. And so before we sink a lot of money, potentially in the hundreds of millions of dollars into any school renovation plan, I think we really need to have a solid plan of what we expect to do in the future and where we expect to go with this. Thank you.
Riley Kearns, will you please ask your question of Jesse Reynolds?
Do you have a plan or support a plan to attract business to Wallingford in order to keep taxes lower for residents of Wallingford?
Thank you for the question, Riley. I think that we should focus on a few things in order to attract businesses to Wallingford. I think one of the things that we need to focus on is how we can accommodate people that say want to maybe start their businesses in the lower downtown area, for example. We have a lot of municipal parking that's behind the buildings on Center Street, and I know that they went through a lot of painstaking work to sort of identify those parking spaces and things. But I think after recently going to Manchester, Connecticut with a similar downtown, when I went behind those buildings, which had similar markings, the parking lots were a lot more wide open. They were easier to navigate. There was less impeding things in them. And I think that's something that we could do that would be relatively, light lifting. To kind of redo a parking lot isn't terribly expensive, but I think if we can do more to actually redesign the parking lots behind those buildings, that would encourage businesses to go back there because they would be ensured that people would actually park there and go to their business. The other thing that we would want to do is we would want to attract businesses through a workforce that's a little bit younger in age. Our population is aging right now, and we have to attract younger people to move to town because younger people, are cheaper to hire. And that's not me being negative. It's a fact. I hire people in the position that I'm in now, and we look for entry-level people that we can grow up through our company. And by attracting young people to work here with incentives somehow, I think that would be a way that we could also draw business. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler Parente, will you please ask your first question of Chris Shortell?
Hi, Mr. Shortell. I'll give you a chance to respond to a similar issue. What is your plan on the plan for economic development in Wallingford?
Well, there's a few plans. I mean, there's the POCD, which is the Plan of Conservation and Development, which has a heavy bias for economic development. But I think that there's a lot of factors that go into economic development, and it starts with having a welcoming community, a safe community. So we have to have a police force, and we have to support them. We have to have good schools, so families will want to move here, and businesses will move here, so families will come with them and feel like they can attend our schools. I also think, I'll point to the schools again, because they're doing a lot to connect with businesses, especially in terms of STEM. In terms of, there's something that's happening next week at Mary Fritz, where we have a new science space center opening that's amazing. I mean, we're partnering with Australia. The only first time it's happened in our country, and that's happening here in Wallingford. So I think that all of those play into economic development. As it was said in the last session, we have a great location, we have cheap electricity, so those are all factors we have to preserve to keep that going. I'll say this too, though. There's a lot of talk in the last session about the rainy day fund. It's not called the rainy day fund. Let's just dispel that. It's called the general fund. The amount of money in the general fund that's available, there's 26 million. Of that, only about 16 million, 17 million is actually available for use. It's unassigned funds. That's accounting. That's fact. The other money in there is already spent, or it's accounted for. It's going to something. It's going to a road that didn't get paved yet this year that'll get paved next year. So you want to attract businesses here? Here's what you don't do. You don't spend down all that money. That's the dumbest thing you can do. So I think it's all of these factors together, and I think Tim Ryan does an excellent job. And we just had an announcement today for that center that's going to go in with Hartford Healthcare and Yale. That's amazing that they're going to have that facility. My uncle had prostate cancer. He had to go to California to get that treatment. That's going to be coming to Wallingford. That's economic development. That's Wallingford. That's happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luther Trammell, will you ask your first question of Vincent Testa?
Vinny, in terms of the CMEC, the decision to do the legal battle with CMEC, do you think that it was a wise decision and that the town got the amount of money it deserved?
Well, you're asking for me to have 20/20 hindsight, and we can all have that. I wasn't on the council that particular term that the first vote was made to start initiating the court challenges and the decisions to actually, cut ties with CMEC. But from everything I've seen and all the arguments I've heard since, I wouldn't, presume to sit here and criticize those decisions as being incorrect. I think the decision to cancel our contract, if you will, and our membership with CMEC was a good one. History will prove that was a good one. The more we learn about that organization, the more we learn that, we were better off not being a part of it. We got benefits from it, certainly, but they got benefits from us being there as well. As far as challenging all of the court cases, the arbitration and all of that went on, we found ourselves in a situation where we had to challenge a lot of the assumptions they were making, a lot of the stances they took, and it was expensive because you needed consultants that cost, frankly, a fortune for their expertise. But we got into this, and we needed to see it through. So that's not something I would criticize either. I supported all of the expenditures we had to put forward. I think we came out ahead. I think there's still arguments about to what degree but we certainly came out on a positive side, and I think we had to challenge those things.
Lauren, will you please ask your next question of Christina Tata?
Sure. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Lauren. How are you?
Recently on the Citizen Mike show, you said that the town could do more with the properties it acquires, given that we, quote, don't have a stellar track record of buying properties and making use of them. You then gave an example of leasing the historic train station downtown, but that building's not vacant. It's a longtime home of Wallingford Adult Education. And to be fair, I know Jerry Liu has an idea on his website to open an indoor farmers market at the train station. So can you clarify what you meant and maybe give a different example of a property that the town already owns it can make better use of?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank the Wallingford Community Women and Government TV and all of you for being here tonight. As far as my comments on not having a stellar track record of the properties we do purchase, there are properties, downtown, uptown. I think, Wooding Kaplan has been discussed for years and years. And, what are we going to do with that? And it was kind of a temporary parking lot. It still kind of is. And as far as my comments on the old train station now, we talk about the lower downtown, so much of that is private property, and there's only so much that government can do. So I think that a good first step might be to use what we have. And like you said, adult education is currently in there, but we also hear from the schools that we have declining enrollment, which would lead me to believe that we have extra room in our schools. So my idea would be if we could move adult education to a school building to make better use of the school building, and then potentially lease that out. Maybe we put a restaurant in there. We make that more of a center, but using something that we already own. So I would love to look at something like that. And that was kind of where I was going with that statement. The Brothers property, for example, that the town just purchased, I was not particularly in favor of that. Again, I was kind of worried that we're getting another parking lot that we may not see much use out of, but I did speak with Tim Ryan, Economic Development Commission chair, not chair, I'm sorry, and he inform me why we purchased that, and they're trying to allow parking so that if we do get private property, private owners to build buildings, they then have parking for that. So I can see the where they were going with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Riley, can you please ask your next question of Jason Zandri?
Mr. Zandri, the town of Wallingford is able to provide low-cost electricity through its municipality agreements with power companies. How can you ensure that the residents of Wallingford will continue to benefit from these agreements?
Thank you for the question. I think that the best way that we can continue to do what we've been doing is to give the electric division and the PUC the breadth that they've currently got, the cushion that they have to operate today, and to let them continue to operate that. As was mentioned earlier in the first segment, there's been a lot of changes recently with us exiting CMAQ, and we're doing a lot of the purchasing on our own, and we're actually doing a very efficient job of it. So I believe that going forward, we should continue to do more of that, continue to make the investments in infrastructure and operations and then purchasing power, so that we have that ability to spread it out amongst all of the ratepayers. I think that's very important. Equally important, I believe that we should be looking to things like renewables when they're smart, when they are economically comparative. So I mean, obviously things like solar and wind, they're going to be more difficult to get into because they're more expensive. But I think if we can strike the right balance as part of our purchases, even when we're purchasing the utility power in bulk, if we can make part of those purchases green purchases, we're helping to be more sustainable. With the project that was potentially brought up for the landfill with the solar energy provider, I really was hoping we could do more of a partnership to that, but we didn't. We're more in the area of leasing that out to them. So I'm encouraged by something like that, and I want to continue to press forward with those types of agreements where if we can't be a part of it, we're actually encouraging from third parties. So that way we're kind of part of the solution for the growth in the future, even if we're not completely connected to it. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Riley, another one for you. Can you ask a question of Joe Marone, please?
Mr. Marone, internships are becoming more and more important for students to gain experience and exposure to career opportunities. How would you attract businesses who may offer internship opportunities for Wallingford students?
Thanks, Riley. That's a good question. So, when we talk about economic development, because your question is really about economic development, right? Is how do you grow businesses in town in order to get them to want to participate with our youth? I think this has to come from two sides. One, well, let's start with the public sector side. I think it comes down to the school system reaching out to businesses to let them know that we have students that are trained and willing and able to take on internships, right? But the other side is really about how do we make the town attractive for businesses to want to add employees and to financially be able to hire interns, either at low cost or at no cost. Because there's a cost certainly with bringing in an intern, because there's training and so on and so forth. So I think what you need to do is look at how making the town as business friendly as we possibly can. There's a lot of talk about trying to attract businesses. I think businesses come to town when they see that, one, low electric rates are huge. Two, you keep taxes in check. And three, you make things like permits and building inspections and things. You make these simple and relatively easy for businesses to get through. You have logical processes that businesses can take advantage of to expand or to hire new workers and so on and so forth. So I think it's really two-sided. I think one, that the school system needs to be on an outreach to try to see who's interested in this or try to field businesses, and then on the other side, you just have to make Wallingford an easy town to do business with. And then I think businesses naturally want to attract young people, as potential future employees. So I think if you set the right stage, I don't think you have to spend a lot of money or do anything about it. You just set the right stage and you let the economy do what it does best. Thanks, Riley.
Thank you.
Tyler, can you ask a question of Jesse Reynolds?
Hi, Mr. Reynolds.
Hi, Tyler.
Would you consider updating the town water treatment facility?
I think we have to. I don't think it's a matter of if I'd want to. If I'm not mistaken, I think we do have to do that. I think the question becomes, with regards to that as well as other things, is how well do we maintain what we have? And there are lots of discussions you can have about being fiscally conservative or spending your money wisely, or whether or not it's a rainy day fund or not. But at the end of the day, if we don't maintain what we have regularly and we don't upkeep what we have regularly, then when it comes time to upgrade or repair or fix, then ultimately what we're going to end up with is a much larger bill had we gone the way that we should have probably early on, or at least with regular maintenance. So, I mean, I'm in favor of doing what we need to do in order to, whether it be compliant with, environmental law or compliant with, other regulations. But ultimately, making sure that we maintain what we have will ultimately cost us less money in the long run. And that's ultimately what I'm looking to try and do as a member of the town council, is to, spend your money wisely. Thank you.
Luther, would you ask a question of Chris Shortell?
Chris, already tonight we've had two occasions where the people from the dais have talked about how wonderful it is that the Yale New Haven Hartford Healthcare cancer facility is being considered for the town of Wallingford. I'm just wondering, do you have any reason to believe or any evidence that would indicate that the Economic Development Commission or the Economic Development staff had any role in them choosing that, making that decision?
I think Tim Ryan was working on that for a long time, at least according to the reporting in the paper. And so I absolutely believe that. And I think that these things, it's a partnership. They're out there trying to attract businesses to town, selling Wallingford. And so that's what you see. And now sometimes this takes a long time, and it's behind the scenes. And we all want instant gratification. We all want, we want to put it out there, get people to flock to Wallingford. It doesn't always work that way sometimes. I guess what I reject is this notion that somehow, first of all, Tim basically is full-time. If you look at the work he does, he's pretty much working full-time. We have a deal in Tim Ryan. Let's start with that. I also feel like this notion, we're going to add 3 more people in that department, and therefore we're going to get 3 times the amount of business. That's not how it works. And I just don't think, I think that we have a great team with Tim and with Casey, and I think they do a great job. And I think, you know, somewhat Wallingford sells itself because of the electricity, the location, the schools, but then there have to be some nudges to businesses. So yeah, to answer your question, I do believe there was a role that was played. I don't think it happened by accident. Thank you for the question.
Lauren, can you ask your next question of Vincent Pesta?
Hi, Vinny.
Hello, Lauren.
Plans to renovate Community Pool Park are moving forward. Costs range from a base cost of $5.6 million to a full site with every alternative of between $6.1 million and $6.5 million. How much in total should we spend on this project? What amenities would you most like to see, and what can wait for another time?
Thank you. That's a great question. That's an issue right before us right now. I've long supported the existence of community pool. I went when I was a kid, a long time ago, and I've always believed it's a great resource for the town. I think it's an attraction in the town, and I think we put it in the plus column every time we talk about our community and what we have to offer. I've always supported projects to maintain it, to renovate it, and do whatever is necessary to keep it in operation. I think the way we've handled this project is the right way. We've taken our time. The Recreation Commission has been doing all the work on this, of course, and that's how things get done in a community. I think they've looked at all different alternatives. They've taken feedback, input from a lot of people within the community, within government, and so forth. Every year we hear the same things. Oh, I wish there was a little more of this. I wish there was a little more of this. I wish we could do something with the tags. I wish we could let maybe people from out of town pay to go. A lot of things have been asked for, and they were all considered. And I think they put together a pretty good, they started with a good survey, and they put together a pretty good package of how to move forward. Now, if we're making a decision about this and it's $500,000, $1 million difference, I'm not sure where I am on that right now. I liked what I saw. I think there's a lot to be gained by maximizing the utilization of the whole site. So I'm leaning towards the more advanced, if you will, plan, because I think that type of investment has the best payoff down the road, because we'll be able to use this site much more than just as a pool. It's an overall recreation facility for the whole community, and that's what we really want our Park and Rec facilities and department to be offering.
Thank you.
Riley, can you ask a question of Christina Tata?
Ms. Tata, are term limits for the office of the mayor something that should be considered, or should the residents of Wallingford continue to have the power to choose the mayor of their choice?
Thank you, Ms. Cairns. I don't think that we should have term limits for the mayor. I think that the fact that our mayor has been voted in time and again for actually longer than I've even been alive is a testament to the faith that the town puts in him. And I think every election is almost, a term limit. The public has the opportunity every single election to decide who they want to lead the town. And every election, for so many terms, Mayor Dickinson has received that vote of confidence. So I would not be in favor of term limits, because I believe that the people should have a choice. I don't believe that another body should be making that decision for the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyler, can you ask a question of Jason Zandri?
Hi, Mr. Zandri.
Hi.
How would you address health-related issues in Wallingford, like the opioid epidemic and the vaping epidemic?
Thank you for that question. I think this past term was a very important term for the council, because we actually brought that up. I worked with Chairman Shortell for the ordinance committee, and we wanted to discuss that. And at the time, we had a lot of pushback. How are we going to police it? Is it anything more than symbolic? How are we going to be able to manage it all? Shouldn't we just wait for the state of Connecticut to do something? They're just going to go over the border to do it, and so on and so forth. I think it all comes back down to a starting point. You have to step somewhere and lead to do something. And I think that's what we were trying to do when we brought it up to the ordinance committee. Even if it was at the time just, you know, a show, a stance, this is where we wanted to position ourselves, because I think it's beyond an epidemic. I think we're at a point of crisis. I mean, with the number of people that are hospitalized or dying from these types of things, just shows the magnitude of what needs to be done. We need to not say that this is not a problem, this is not happening in Wallingford, because it is. We need to face it, and we need to take action in steps. So we did that here. We passed that ordinance that raised the age, and then the state came in right behind. They were already working on it. All it showed is that we were willing to take that first step. I think beyond just doing that, we need to continue to partner as a council and as a town and as residents behind groups like the Coalition for a Better Wallingford to continue to drive the message home that there are alternatives, to reach out, to get help when they need it, and we'd like to invite them in if they don't feel like reaching out. Because if we don't address this, if we don't come up and face it forward, then there's going to be a lot of misuse of these things, and the kids and even some adults are going to be negatively impacted by it. And we need to be taking that first step, and that's why we wanted to make sure that we did that. So thank you for the question.
Tyler again. Can you ask a question of Joe Marone?
Hi, Mr. Marone.
Hi, Tyler.
Heading into your next term, what would be the most important issue to you facing Wallingford?
So I think the most important issue facing Wallingford, you know, we live in a great town, and we don't face a ton of what I would say are real critical issues. You know, crime is not a major issue. You know, poverty is something that we're certainly concerned about. Opioids is something that we're concerned about, but not something that's really hanging over our heads. I think that the biggest issue for us is going to be to try to maintain the key services that we have now at a cost that's reasonable to our citizens. You know, as you know, I talked a little bit earlier about salaries and benefits and the role that that plays in our town budget. Public safety is very expensive to maintain. We have an excellent public safety system. Our fire and our police and our EMTs and whatnot are excellent in town, but it's very expensive to maintain. And so I think the greatest challenge for Wallingford going forward is going to be, you know, how do you maintain this very high level of service and have the appropriate service at a cost that's reasonable to the citizens. In addition, you know, maintaining roads, I mean, there's an expense to everything, right? So maintaining the roads is a major expense. It's also something that needs to be very carefully planned for. You know, it's funny because I heard a lot of hay tonight talked about our the rainy day fund or the unencumbered fund balance. We're doing a renovation on our sewage treatment plant that's like $60 million, right? So when you look at $60 million, I mean, that would eat up the rainy day fund pretty quickly. So I think it's easy to look at that money and say, let's spend it on whatever projects we have now. But I think if you're playing long term, then you have to look at what are your needs going to be, you know, long in the future. And so, thanks, Tyler. I'm all set.
Thank you.
Luther, can you ask the next question of Jesse Reynolds?
Jesse, when the latest school renovation proposal actually gets implemented and the projects are actually done, it'll mark the third time since 2005 where the town has done either full or partial renovations on its school buildings. Do you think that the town should bite the bullet and in some cases with some buildings actually build new and more modern schools?
Thank you for the question, Luther. I think it would have to depend school by school. I can't say that I'm privy to knowledge of what every condition of every building is here. That's probably something you could ask my dad, or maybe I should walk across the driveway and ask him. We live next door to each other. But what I can say about what I know about what's currently being proposed is something that kind of stood out to me in the survey responses. And the number one reason that people gave for choosing the Cadillac options, not the steady as you go 17 million, but the 100 plus million, however way you want to slice it, is the condition of the buildings. If you look at the respondents to that survey, they were overwhelmingly kind of focused as people who probably have kids in those schools. So it means the people like myself who go into the buildings, look around, They see the buildings in disrepair. And so that's why people, the majority of people, chose these really expensive options with really nothing attached to it in terms of what would actually be the benefits to the students in the buildings themselves. It was mostly around, what would be your reasonings behind it. So I think it would have to go with a building by building, assessment. The Fritz School is fairly modern. There's been a lot of work done in some schools. But my kids went to Rock Hill School. I could point to a couple areas in there where there's probably some work that needs to be done. DAG, my kids both went there. I could certainly point to a lot of areas in that school that needs to be redone. So I think it has to go school by school, but ultimately what you need to ask yourselves is, why are people's confidence in the buildings that their kids go to school in so poor that they're willing to spend $117 million on something that doesn't say anything about how well their kids are going to perform? Thank you.
Lauren, can you ask the next question of Chris Shortell?
Sure. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Should the town council go to arbitration more often on union contracts that come before the council, something in which you risk a worse deal, but other towns like Meriden have done successfully?
So they tried it, I think, about 10 years ago, and typically with arbitration, what happens is you're at the mercy of who you get to arbitrate, the agreement, and it often swings in favor of a union. And sometimes they end up with more than what they were going to get if you just went with the contract. So it's a tough one. I'm torn on this a little bit, though, because one of the things I talk about a lot in the council is the HSAs. And everyone's sick of hearing about the HSA. But one of the things I've been a proponent of is getting more health insurance plans in the contracts that are more aligned with what private sector employees have. This is for our town and board employees. And so sometimes I feel like I wish we could take a harder stance, and that would save the town money. The health insurance is about an $8 million line item in our overall budget. So when I first got on the council, I tended to vote against some of the contracts for that reason. But as time went on and I got more attuned to the system and we did have some arbitrations, I realized that it doesn't always work that way. So that's a tough one, but I think for now I'd say the answer is no, because it was tried. But I think it's always something we shouldn't be afraid of down the road, depending on the contract. Because as Councilor Marone said earlier, salaries and benefits, that is our biggest cost. So I think anything we can do to curtail that spending is something we should look at. So I think we should be open to it, but in general, I'm as of now, I'm a little bit hesitant to say yes. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Riley, can you ask the next question of Vincent Testa?
Good evening, Mr. Testa.
Good evening, Riley.
So, Wallingford has a good record of being fiscally responsible with taxpayers' money and has been able to set aside a substantial amount of money in a rainy day fund. The town is going to have to commit in the near future to possibly digitally upgrading the records of the town, investing in the renovation or rebuilding of our schools, and improving the conditions of the roads all over town. What do you feel is an immediate concern that the town needs to address that would justify the use of these rainy day funds to pay for this concern?
Wow, it's a good one. Well, first of all, I am not familiar with anybody in office or running for office that is proposing we spend all the money in this rainy day fund. I've never heard anybody suggest it. I've never suggested it, and anybody that would suggest it is foolhardy. We're in a very good position having the extra funds in our general fund that are there for many purposes, but one of those purposes is to maintain a strong standing with the credit agency so that we can borrow money at favorable rates. The way the town should fund any large project is through the process of bonding. That's how things should be done. And I'm in favor of bonding more capital items, and I've been arguing for that over many years. Because what that allows you to do is look back at your budget and those types of dollars that are in capital expenditure funds that are true tax dollars, and possibly pull that back. And that leads to cost savings to the taxpayers, lower tax rates. The money that's in the funds now, that's in the bank now, if you will, we're really only arguing about several $1 million. I mean, I know that's a lot of money, but my point is it's only $2, $3, $4 million as far as how much should we really keep in there to satisfy all the requirements of proper budgeting? And that leads you to your year-to-year budgeting. We should be looking more at not adding to that rainy day fund, if you will, not adding to that budget surplus, and budgeting tighter so that we don't budget for additional surpluses on an annual basis. It's a year-to-year budgeting issue. All of the projects you talked about, they're all viable, they're all good, worthwhile projects. They need to be incorporated into your regular annual operating budget or put into a bonding ordinance, not, paid for with our money in the bank.
Tyler, can you ask the next question of Christina Tata?
Hi, Ms. Tata.
Hi, Mr. Prenti.
Would you consider implementing more renewable resources in Wallingford? Do you feel it's worth the cost?
Thank you. I certainly think we should look at that as we build anything new. So if we're building new buildings, then definitely that would be a perfect time to look into, using renewable energy, putting that in the first place. As far as existing facilities, I know, for example, the streetlights. I think that we're replacing the existing streetlights with the LED lights as the existing ones are burning out. And I think that's a good way to go because we don't have a huge burden on the taxpayers up front to completely replace everything. But as we go, we're slowly making that investment to more renewable energy. So I'm certainly in support of that plan and how we've been working with that. Thank you.
Luther, can you ask the next question of Jason Zandri?
Jason, you're a tech guy. You work in the tech sector. And you're a tech guy in a town whose town government has a reputation for being anti-technology. Do you support and would you favor increased use of technology both at the town government level and encouraging the Board of Education to make a broader use of technology?
Thank you for that question, Luther. I think without a doubt that we are behind the wheel, behind the eight ball when it comes to technology in Wallingford. I mean, there's a saying that I'm fond of in technology. Some people don't want to be bleeding edge or cutting edge. Sometimes there's a great deal of status to wait certain things out and to not be necessarily first to the game, but it also doesn't pay you to be last to the game. You're going to reach a point where certain requirements are going to be forced upon you, and it'll come down and it'll be defended against as, gee, this is a state mandate. They won't let us do this anymore on paper, on fax, and so forth. But when you're that far behind the eight ball, the problem becomes the consultancies that come in to do this work for you are going to know that, and then you're going to be paying top dollar because they know that you can go out to bid all you want on it, but this is a requirement at a state level, a federal level, or just a general requirement, and then you're going to be spending more. I think it's time to do more with the technology. It's going to be a cost savings for the town in the end. It's always going to be an expenditure up front to get it put in, get it installed, get people retrained, but you will save time, money, and effort in the longer haul. People are going to have an easier time. Businesses are going to have an easier time. Counter time is going to be cut down. Phone call time will be cut down. There's a common point that's made that people like to call in and be able to speak to somebody. There's plenty of times that I've called and people are unavailable, and there's phone messages taken on pads and paper, and it takes a day or two for people to get back, when an email message could have helped resolve the entire problem. So I think it's worth the investment. I think it's only natural where the general public is going, where businesses go. If all the businesses that are running today thought the technology was a waste, they wouldn't be implementing it. Thank you.
And Luther, could you ask a question of Joe Marone?
Joe, earlier you made mention of the changing face of education, and you also made mention of the labor costs associated with education, teachers' salaries, teachers' benefits. Now, at some point, if your view of this prevails on the full council, there's going to be a point at which this would have to be implemented. And by that, when I say this, I'm referring to, it would seem to me that you're advocating in the future for fewer teachers in the Wallingford School District. How would you implement that, and when should it be implemented?
So thanks. That's a tricky question, Luther. So when I talk about the future, I'm not saying the next 5 years or maybe even 10 years, but I think you need to start looking at now at how the school system is going to evolve, say, over the next 30 to 50 years, and where you want to be, where say you want to be in 25 years, as opposed to where we are now. So I think it's going to be profoundly expensive either way. The system we have now is profoundly expensive, and it works really well. I think we deliver a great educational product in Wallingford, and I think the system is still profoundly expensive. And I think the future is going to also be profoundly expensive. So how do you implement it, or under what time frame? I think you need to look at where you want to be, say, in 25 years. And if the idea is to reduce staff and have it be a lot more technological, I take a little bit of deference to something that was said earlier. Our Board of Education, I think, has made great strides with technology. I think they are cutting edge in many ways. But I think going forward, you have to look at what's the next step going to be, right? So what I said before is I think you're going to have to see fewer teachers, because I think that's our teachers are wonderful people. They do an excellent job in the classroom with our kids. But ultimately, if the system can't sustain the same number of professionals that we currently have, I think there's a lot of things that you could look at in terms of maybe big schools isn't the system at all. Perhaps you have instead of having one large elementary school that houses, say, 400 kids, perhaps you have 10 smaller schools that house, say, 40 kids. So you have like a neighborhood school. I mean, I think there's a lot of different configurations you could look at. So I think rather than just renovating the schools or building new buildings, let's start looking at what we think we're going to need in the future. I know I kind of meandered there a little bit. So when do you start implementing it? Well, I think you have to have a plan of where you want to be in 25 years, and then you're going to have to break that down into little steps as far as what you want to see. It would involve a lot of pain points, I think, for parents and for students, because you're going to be closing schools and you're going to be looking at perhaps alternative methods of education. But I think ultimately it would give you the strongest product or the strongest benefit for parents and students. Thanks, Luther.
Lauren, can you ask the next question of Jesse Reynolds?
Sure. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Lauren.
Given that the town has run a deficit for the last 2 fiscal years, if elected, where would you cut the budget?
Let's hope. Let's hope that revenue magically appears and then we don't have to cut the budget. But, that would have to be something that would have to happen in the process of the workshops, where I would have to be able to go through the budget itself and look for, any redundancies. I think that, there are ways that we could possibly, invest our money a little bit differently. There's some suggestions that, if we change the way that we invest our pension money, that maybe that would free up some costs in terms of the people that manage that. There's, other ways that we could probably look to save money, but I think, the bigger question isn't so much like how are we going to cut, because I think first we have to figure out a way to fill that hole that Bristol Myers created in our grand list, and that's going to take a lot of creativity, and that's going to take everybody's, cooperation, not just Democrats and Republicans. We got to figure out this problem, because our town is going to be challenged with something in the future where our aging population is going to get shouldered with a tax burden unlike what you see right now. Like, we can all talk about how we compare to Hamden and these places, but you can't compare Grand List. They're not apples to apples. They're apples to oranges, to plums, to watermelons. And so the first thing that we really have to do is have an honest conversation about the way that we spend our money. And then if there's no way to cut our way out of it, then ultimately we're going to have to generate the revenue either in a tax increase or in some other way, but there's no other way around it, that's going to be placed on the citizens. But I'll be honest and say I won't, say I'm not going to raise taxes, because I don't know if I can, I could vote against it, but if I'm not in the majority, then what's a vote against it? It's just a vote in posturing. So ultimately what we have to do is figure out a way out of this situation, similar to what Joe said about education. That's long-term. We need long-term goals. Thank you.
Riley, can you ask your final question of Chris Shortell?
Hello, Mr. Shortell.
Hi.
What would be your position on the expansion of trails throughout Wallingford and as well as the town acquiring open space?
Oh, I'm definitely for that, and we do look at that actively on the council. If you go to our agendas, which are online, along with everything else, the last agenda item of every council meeting item, usually it's number 10 or 11, sometimes it's number 20, is an executive session that's pursuant to the sale or lease or purchase of land. It's a standing item. We don't always do it, but it gives the mayor an opportunity to come to us in executive session where we can't. It's just the council and the mayor. And he brings to us sometimes opportunities where the town can look at open space and purchase open space, which we've done in my 4 years in the council on a few occasions. So that happens every 2 weeks, possibly. I also think we have to support the Conservation Commission. They do an excellent job of really monitoring all of the trails. They work with students from Choate, from Quinnipiac, to reblaze some of the trails. It was mentioned earlier that they helped with Tyler Mill after the microburst. You know, there's a new trail, I think it's the Fresh Meadow Trail up in my side of town, just the west side. Everyone's from the east side but me. But that's accessible, handicapped accessible, which I think is amazing that we actually have a trail like that now. So they do an amazing job, so we have to support them as well. And part of being on the council, I think, is, you know, we pass the budget, we pass ordinances, but it's also being an advocate. And it's, you know, it's something where maybe it's an actionable thing, but just us having an awareness. I brought the Conservation Commission to the council about 1.5 years ago to give a presentation. I don't know the last time they were before us, and it was just for that reason. I wanted them to be able to speak to the town through a council meeting and tell us all of the wonderful things they were doing. So it's a mixture of that, advocacy, purchasing open space, but I'm absolutely in favor of any expansion of trails. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Tyler, can you ask your last question of Vincent Testa?
Hi, Mr. Testa. What is the key to improving education in Wallingford? Do you agree with Mr. Marone that technology should play a larger role in our school systems?
Well, thanks for that question. As you know, I'm a little bit involved in education since I teach at the school you attend. Yes, first of all, I do agree with Mr. Marone that we should utilize technology as much as possible in the schools. We already do quite a bit. This year, for example, every kid, as you know, in the school is walking around, they have their own Chromebook. So that certainly makes it a lot easier to tell everybody to put their cell phones away. But just today, I had the opportunity, half of my class was doing one thing, the other half of the class I was able to say, get out your Chromebooks and answer these questions and do this research and do whatever. So I think the schools are doing a wonderful job already utilizing technology. Next week, we're delivering a luncheon to our breakfast to the superintendent and a bunch of visitors from Australia, and it's going to be held at Mary Fritz School in what is now being known as the, I don't even remember the name of it. It's at it's a space center type research facility. I haven't even seen it yet, and I was amazed listening to the details about this. It's not even finished yet, but the Astrophysics Center or something. You know, it's part of the STEM program that we're working on. So there's a lot of great things being done with technology in the schools right now. I don't agree with my esteemed colleague that we don't need as many teachers, but that's another story. But I think we're making good use of technology, but I also think we're doing it wisely. Technology is a tool, and one good advantage to that tool is it allows teachers to, as I did today, engage a majority of the class in an activity and be able to then focus my attention on 1, 2, 3, 4 other students who might need hands-on activity assistance at that particular time. So if we utilize technology the proper way, then it's meaningful.
Luther, can you ask your final question of Christina Tata?
Christina, isn't it a little bit disingenuous for politicians in Wallingford to compare the town's mill rate to other neighboring communities when Wallingford residents don't get garbage removal for their tax dollar?
I don't know that would have a huge effect on the mill rate, so I don't find that disingenuous. I think as a whole, Wallingford budgets very well. I think that the mayor presents fairly lean budgets to the council. Sometimes the council, accepts or doesn't. They could make further cuts. So certainly, we don't have trash pickup, and other surrounding towns might. But what do we have that they don't? So, to compare mill rates, I think is very valid. And I wouldn't find that as disingenuous. I think that our mill rate is very reasonable, and I think that's one of the things that attracts people to our town. Certainly something that attracted my husband and I to this town. And so as a whole, no, I think that comparing mill rates is valid, and I don't think that that's a disingenuous comment to make. Thank you.
Okay, Lauren, can you ask your final question of Jason Zandri?
Sure. Hi, Jason.
Hi.
Overall homelessness has decreased substantially in Connecticut since 2014, when the state set a goal to end chronic homelessness. But one area that showed an increase in homelessness, according to CCM, was the total number of people ages 14 to 24 who are homeless or suffer from housing instability. Anyone who's driven on Route 5 recently has noticed that many of the new panhandlers who have popped up along the commercial strip seem to fit into that age group. Not that homelessness and panhandlers are unique to Wallingford, but what's the best way for the town to address panhandlers and homelessness in general?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I think coming from work in New York City just today, as an example, I see a lot of that on the subways, on the street corners. So it's not a unique thing to just a large city, like you just pointed out. Here we are here in town, and we have this problem. So I think it makes sense for us to work with the different agencies, like the Columbus House, like Youth and Social Services, if we're going down to the younger people that we're talking about that are homeless or have home instability, and find out what is the root cause. Is it a money issue? Is it a housing issue? Is there an issue at home where there's conflict and these people are leaving? And find out what's the real root of the problem, because everything seems simple when it's solved with it's a money issue. And the reason that I say it like this is, again, going back to New York City example. There have been times that I've been in the city and I've seen individuals with the sign that says, I'm hungry, I'm looking for food, and I've offered to buy them lunch, and they refuse the lunch because they don't really want to eat, they just want the money. So we're not at the root of the problem. So I think it involves town agencies, if we're talking about just Wallingford, getting involved and finding out what the root is the issue of individual A that's at location A, and how do we help address that. And if it's just the simple issue of just panhandling for money, maybe we need an ordinance to kind of end that. But at the same time, if it's a situation of there's a real problem, there's a real need, how do we help somebody? I think we need to investigate and find out how could we help them. Can we let them know about housing at Columbus House? Can we let them know about job services that are available? Can we tie them in and let them utilize services at the library to look for work? Find out what the root cause is and try to address it at that point. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Joe Marone, will you please begin?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the Wallingford Community Women for hosting this forum. I'd like to thank Luther, Tyler, Riley, and Lauren for your thoughtful questions. As we get older, we all try to find a way to keep fit, right? So I've taken up running as sort of a hobby to keep fit. The funny thing about running is when you whiz through Wallingford in a car, you see a lot of things, but you miss a lot of things. And so when you're running, you see things like cracks in the street, you see blight, you see empty buildings, but you also see things, you see a lot of parties, you see a lot of people out grilling, having a good time, you see a lot of lots of people doing yard work, especially if you're on a Saturday or a Sunday. You see open space, you see wild animals, you see all kinds of things in town. And you sort of come to the realization that it's all a matter of perspective. So it's easy to look at the incumbents here or the current town council, the mayor, and say, Wallingford has a lot of issues, right? We don't really have a lot of issues. What do you hear people talking about? You hear people talking about why can't we pay our bills online? Or why can't we get the land records online? You don't really hear people talking about things like drug and crimes and some of these things that affect other cities. So I think when you look at it, when you try to take a little wider view of it, the things that we're talking about, the major issues in town are really, what we would think of as first world problems, right? We're not talking about major issues that affect some of our larger cities. Running the town to me is more like running a marathon, and it's not like running a sprint. We have money, we'd like to spend it, but sometimes you have to look at, if you use all your energy at the beginning of the marathon, you're going to finish poorly. Or if you don't use enough energy, then then you don't finish as well as you want to. So I think that running the town is a lot like running a race. Last week was my 17th wedding anniversary. My wife is a very wonderful woman, and the thing that I've learned over 17 years is sometimes you need to speak up, and sometimes you just need to keep your mouth shut. And so to me, government is much the same way, is that sometimes when something's going wrong, you need to speak up, and sometimes you need to let the economy and let the people just do what they want to do on their own, and they don't need your hand holding them. So sometimes my focus is just to shut up.
Your time is up.
And I will shut up.
Right on cue.
Excellent. Okay. Jesse Reynolds, would you please make your closing statement?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the opportunity to come out here and, sit up here with, people who are concerned about the community like I am. Thank you to the Wallingford Community Women. Thank you to Lauren and Luther and Tyler and Riley. Your questions were very important. This election is a choice, and every election is a choice, but this one is a choice because you have the opportunity to sort of change the balance of how our town is run. The status quo right now, it's a fairly cheery picture, but you really have to think about what are the long-term implications of how we run things right now. And without, we talk a lot about economic development, but ultimately what everyone seems to talk about is economic growth. Okay, economic growth is how many businesses did we get to move to town, how many jobs did we create, but economic development is about the whole community. It's about public health. It's about the opioid epidemic. It's about everything. It's about the lower downtown area where you have one street with brand new bricks and lights and things going in, and the parallel street has lights with trees growing over them and bricks that are heaving and sidewalks that are cracked. So if you want to pay for things and make things look nice, you better take care of the things that you made look nice 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so that all costs money. And so while we can all sit here and say, we've done a good job keeping the budget low and everything else, what we can't say is that we've maintained the things in our town that need to be maintained. We haven't acted when we were supposed to act. We haven't implemented technology when we should have. We haven't made upgrades to the waste treatment plant. There's lots of things that we need to do that we often ignore under the guise of fiscal responsibility. Hope to have your support on November 5th. Thank you.
Chris Shortell, will you please make your closing statement?
I just want to say Mindy Marone is a saint. I was at Celebrate Wallingford 6 years ago in my first campaign for Board of Ed, and something really scary happened. I was passing out my information, and a woman actually stopped in front of me and began to read it. And so after what seemed like an eternity, she looked at me and she said, you say you stand for fiscal responsibility and good stewardship of tax dollars. Everyone says that. What do you really stand for? And I proceeded to try to convince her that I really did stand for those things. Now that I've been up here for 4 years on the council and 2 on the Board of Ed before that, what I've learned though is that, first of all, that is the ultimate goal of the council, is to keep the mill rate low and keep the town affordable. But that's the starting point, at least for me. I've become a big believer in being an advocate as a counselor, an advocate for issues to help make government work better for the people, and not to be afraid to challenge the status quo. And so I've tried to do that in my 4 years, whether it was working with the mayor and the council to get community pool open for 2.5 extra weeks, or working with Chief Wright to get the police department parking lot used as a safe zone for people to exchange things they bought on Facebook, or passing an ethics ordinance with the whole council because a resident suggested it at a meeting and I thought it was a good idea, so I sponsored it. I've tried to be an advocate and to try to make government work better and be more transparent, and that's my commitment to you. I will continue to do that. It's been an honor to serve on the council for the last 4 years, and I do ask for your vote. You do get up to 9 votes. But most importantly, whether you vote for me or not, I hope you do get out and vote. If you're watching on TV, obviously if you're sitting here, I think you're going to vote. But if you're watching on YouTube or the public access channel, please get informed. These are the most impactful elections you will vote in as a resident. So please get out, get informed, and vote. I would like to thank our reporters, Luther and Lauren, our students, Wallingford Community Women, and the TV station. Thank you for sponsoring this forum.
Vincent Testa, will you please make your closing remarks?
Thank you. I also would like to thank the Wallingford Community Women for sponsoring this event. Thank you, Luther, Lauren, for your questions. And Tyler, Riley, Thank you. You guys did a great job. And if anybody that wants to go with the old trope, kids today, they just have to look at you. We're in good shape. And I see you and your peers every day. And I said, we're going to be in good hands pretty soon. You know, as I was thinking about tonight, a couple things came to mind. 30 years ago, to paraphrase the Beatles, right? 30 years ago today, I was up here running for my first election for Board of Education. You were alive then. And I was starting to think about, you know, all the years I've been fortunate enough to serve you, people of Wallingford. And at the same time, I was also thinking about my mother because, well, she passed away 8 years ago today. So I was thinking about her, thinking about politics, and I started thinking, okay, would my mom approve of the job I've done the last 8 years? Would she be proud of me? I didn't have to wonder when she was alive, because she would tell me. But I thought about what she taught me. And this is what I've been thinking about, judging myself, the service I've done. What did she teach me? She taught me to be respectful. And I think anyone I've ever served with will tell you that, you know, I've always been respectful of my colleagues, respectful of the public, respectful of people who have questions of me. I've tried to be respectful in my behavior. I've tried to be honest. She always told me to be humble. I'm working on that. She always said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. And not batting 1,000 there, but I'm doing pretty darn good. But I'd like to think she thought I've done a good job the last 8 years. And it's just I've been honored to serve you for over 20 years as a board member, as a town councilor. And I hope you've been happy with the job I've done, and I ask for your support for the opportunity to serve you for another 2 years on the council. Thank you.
Christina Tata, can you please make your closing statement?
Thank you. When my husband and I were married 12 years ago, we were looking for houses, and we looked at well over 100 houses and couldn't find one that we liked. Finally, we found the perfect house, and there was one problem. The house wasn't in Wallingford. So what did we do? We ended up building basically that same house in Wallingford. And I tell that story to show what Wallingford means to us and how valuable of a town this is. We have affordable taxes, reliable and affordable utilities. It's a safe town. We love going uptown to go to dinner, and we can walk at night, and it's safe, and that's so important. The schools are good, and what makes all of these things happen are the people. And I really wanted to be a part of that, and so I started coming to town council meetings. Eventually I was appointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I still serve on and I thoroughly enjoy. I was vice chair of the Charter Revision Commission several years ago, and I think that, first of all, taught me so much about our town government, but also how to lead a politically diverse group of people. I'm also involved with the 350th Jubilee Committee. And that group is just people giving hours and hours of time to throw Wallingford a birthday party next year. And that just speaks to the heart of Wallingford. And I really want to continue to help out. I love this community. I think that my background on those boards and commissions, as well as my work background, which I didn't get to talk a lot because I got no economic development questions, which were the ones I really wanted. But I think if you know about my work background and the boards and commissions I've served on, I hope that you'll agree that I would be a good addition to the council, and I would truly appreciate your support. Please vote for Christina Tata for town council. Thank you.
And Jason Zandri, can you please make your final statement?
Thank you. I'd first like to thank Wallingford Community Women for putting together the forum. Of course, the panel that asked us questions. I appreciate your time and effort and energy in that. Wallingford Government TV, for the folks that are here in attendance, and for the people that are watching at home. I'm pretty much going to close my time up here the way I've pretty much done it the past 5 times I've sat up here. I am a 4th generation resident of this town. My great-grandparents came to Wallingford. My grandparents were here as well. My father and mother raised my sister and I'm raising my 4 kids here in this town. So when I think about the job responsibility and the duty of what I'm doing here on council, I don't look at it as any different than I would as a citizen, because before I sat up here as a councilor, I was a citizen and I was always involved, all the way back to high school, I was always doing something, or I was always involved in some way. There were ebbs and flows in that time, and there's always an importance to be a part of the community rather than just live in the community. I teach that to my kids today. We walk the linear trail over at the Quinnipiac River, and once a year we go out and we clean up the labyrinth. And my kids are always asking me, why are we the ones doing it? Don't they have a committee that does it? And I said, if not us, then who? We use it, we should pitch in, and we clean that labyrinth up every year. I don't know how many people know that. I know that the Linear Trail Committee knows that, but the point of the matter is I'm trying to give back to the community like I've always done. And I hope that the residents understand that it's their responsibility this one time of the year to get informed, get involved, and vote. There's 26,000 voters, less than 12,000 show up every municipal election. I want that to change. The 9 people you see up here are going to be responsible for everything that you deal with on a regular basis for the next 2 years. So I hope to see you on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes part 2 of the 2019 Town Council Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to vote on November 5th.